Well, good morning, everyone. If you are living in Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, that general area, Pennsylvania, then you woke up to snow this morning, and we're
Still doing
it. As Tammy says, it's still doing it. I tried to focus the camera so you could see the snow out the window, but it was just a glare from the glass and everything, so that didn't work so good. But probably for most of you, all you have to do is look out your window to see the snow coming down. But don't be distracted by that for now, because we got some stuff to deal with this morning. Some God's Word, to some worship to offer up to the one who is worthy of our worship and our praise. Some of you are very excited to have the snow coming down. Some of you are like, I'm ready for winter to be over. I understand both perspectives. Whenever I walk out the door, having to take the dog for a walk, I'm ready for winter to be over. But Tammy, when she sees snow on a Monday and quite possibly gets her another day off from school, as some of the others of you that may be participating with us as well, changes your plans, then be thankful for that. Who knows, I might actually get out and do a little bit of playing in the snow today. Maybe build my first snowman in quite some time. We'll see what kind of snow it is. We already have our bowls out in our sidewalk to gather the snow to be able to make some snow cream this afternoon. So looking forward to that. But whatever it is that the snow brings to you today, enjoy, stay safe, stay warm. And one of the things that can help you be warm in your spirit as well as in your body is getting some hot air taken care of in a positive way in singing in worship to our God. He is worthy of it. And we're going to sing this morning about a wonderful event that hopefully has happened in your life, has happened in mine, and that is that we've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Let's sing together this morning. Redeemed, how I love to proclaim it, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed through His infinite mercy, His child, and forever I am. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed through His infinite mercy, His child, and forever I am. I was a little high. Let me try to take it a little bit lower this time. Redeemed. No, I was higher. Redeemed and so happy in Jesus, no language my rapture can tell. I know that the light of His presence with me doth continually dwell. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed through His infinite mercy, His child, and forever I am. I think of my blessed Redeemer, I think of Him all the day long. I sing, for I cannot be silent, His love is the theme of my song. Redeemed, redeemed, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, redeemed through His infinite mercy, His child, and forever I am. Now, I know sometimes we can sing songs. I'm guilty of it just as much as a lot of other people are. Sing songs without actually thinking about the words that it is that we're singing. That last verse there says, I think of my blessed Redeemer. I think of Him all the day long. Now, I hope that you weren't lying when you sang those words, or that you just weren't paying attention. I hope that is your practice. If it's not already, I would suggest that it be, so that as you are going through whatever it is you're facing, wonderful, awful, whatever it might be, think of Jesus as you're going through those things and get His perspective on the things that you face, in order that you might get a new perspective on it and be able to see things as He sees them in all His wisdom, His grace, His love, and His power. I want to share some quick announcements with you this morning. For one, I want to thank our church family for continuing to be faithful in your tithes and your offerings. So very thankful for your faithfulness in those things, and our church is in very good financial standing, even with the pandemic, as a result of that. But don't forget to be doing those things. You don't think of them as sending to the Lord. I mean, sending them to the church. Excuse me. They're offerings to God as an act of praise, as an act of worship, as to Him. And those of you that are not normally part of our church family, if you have a church, then make sure you are faithful to your church and your giving as well. I would ask you once again to share this service with other people. That's a way that you can get this message out to others. And it's an easy way for you to invite people to participate with us, whether it be online or whether it be in physical presence with one another, which is going to be true of us next Sunday. If you're there, whether it be in person, right now live, or whether it be as you see in the recorded version of this, drop a comment in that comment section there so that we'll know that you were there. Give some feedback to let us know if these things are beneficial to you, maybe even some other questions that we haven't addressed in our question series here in January that you would like to see addressed. And whether or not we do them in an actual message on a Sunday morning, I can address them to you personally. Not that I'm the answer guy, but I know the one who is, and I know this book right here that can give you the answers that you are looking for. We will be doing our weeknight Bible studies this week, 5 o'clock, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and we'll continue the theme that we are focusing on this morning, as there is much more to talk about than we'll have time to deal with here today. Of course, the most important announcement is this time next Sunday morning won't be here in my house. I won't welcome you into my house, although there are other times that I'll welcome you in. But we will be in our church building located 18,800 Middle Ridge Road. And if you're excited about that, hit that love icon right there right now to let us know and let others know how excited it is that you're going to be with us in physical presence come next Sunday morning. Now, I gave some details about what we're going to do related to that on our Tuesday night Bible study. If you were there, then you heard those, but let me just share a couple of things quickly with you. We will just have our 10:45 service, no Sunday school for now. Hopefully back in March, we will, as long as things don't go bad with COVID again, we'll start Sunday school back up in March. As well as at that time, we hope to be able to start our junior church and our nursery back up at that point. But I need some help. I need some more people who are willing to help in those ministries in order to move those things forward. We will wear our masks from the time we walk in, as much as is possible, until the time we walk out. We'll have our overflow room. So if it gets too crowded in one area, or you're not comfortable with the number of people that will be in our sanctuary, then we'll have an overflow room that you can also go into, and then it will have the feed of our live service as well. So if you've got any questions about that, please contact me, and we'll be glad to pass along any details with you. Now, I know if you're anything like me, you've gotten comfortable doing things the way that we've been doing them. You get to sleep in a little bit later. You don't have to worry about what you've got on. Some of you quite possibly just roll out of bed and pop your computer or your phone or your tablet open. We could make next Sunday morning come as you are Sunday, but I'm not sure we'd want to see that from everybody. But still, it's an opportunity for us to get together. So let's make whatever sacrifices we need to, whether it be less sleep, whether it be, whatever it is we've been wearing, whatever it is that makes us comfortable. Come. Be a part of our live worshiping together, in person together. We need to be in each other's company. One thing that will be better about that time is, for one, we'll have Terry playing the piano once again, and we'll be able to hear each other singing once again, and that will be great. But regardless of whether it's just you or you got your whole family there to join in singing together, let's sing once again. And let's sing of the mercies of the Lord. Let's sing together. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. I will sing. I will sing I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord. With my mouth will I make known thy faithfulness, thy faithfulness. With my mouth will I make known thy faithfulness to all generations. I will sing of the Lord forever. I will sing, I will sing, I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord. Something beautiful, something good, all my confusion He understood. All I had to offer Him was brokenness and strife, but He made something beautiful of my life. Now we're going to sing that again in just a second, but if you're there on our Facebook page seeing the words to these songs, then you see the verse of that song there. I'm not going to try to sing it to you. I don't know the tune well on that. But I do want to read it to you, even if you're not with us and seeing it there. I want to read this to you. It goes like this. If there ever were dreams so lofty and noble, they were my dreams at the start. And the hopes for life's best were the hopes that I harbored down deep in my heart. But my dreams turned to ashes, and my castles all crumbled. My fortune turned to loss. So I wrapped it all in the rags of my life and laid it at the cross. Folks, wherever you are, whatever it is you're dealing with, whatever mess you may have made of your life, if you will take it and you will bring it to Jesus, then He can make something beautiful out of you. Let's sing that chorus once again. Something beautiful, something good, all my confusion He understood. All I had to offer Him was brokenness and strife, but He made something beautiful of my life. I know that each of you is going through different things in your life right now. Some of you, life is pretty good. Others, life is a struggle, and it's been a struggle for a while. If you would like us to be praying for you, maybe something specific, then you can write that prayer request in the comments there. You can send a message to us. Or if you just, if it's something personal or something too long to go into, just put down prayers, please, in the comment section, and know that there will be people that are praying for you. I want to mention some specific things here this morning. We've been praying for baby Kinley, dealing with some breathing issues. Linda Lease is the one that brought this to our attention. And Linda, keep us up to date on what's going on there, please. And then Kaya Duvall. I've mentioned her before, but she was born back in November. This is Tammy's great niece. And she was born with a tumor on her neck. And that is creating a lot of difficulties for her. She's going to have to see some specialists out in Arizona. They live in Virginia, but they're going to be traveling out to Arizona in order to be able to get some help from some specialists out there. But continue to be in prayer for Mike Nicolosi. He had surgery on his hand a couple of weeks ago. Went to the surgeon on Friday. And things are progressing well, but continue to be in prayer for him. Then for Christy Phillips. She had a heart incident on Friday. Not sure exactly still what's going on. But she was in the hospital for a period of time and did some tests or need some further tests and everything. But be in prayer for her physically and for her and Shane emotionally as they try to get some answers related to that. Then Darlene sent a prayer request out Friday. I was not where I could write down the request, but it was for a young boy who's having issues with his brain. I think an infection in his brain. I don't remember the name, but please be in prayer for him. Joe contacted me this morning and said that Finn got bitten probably by something, has a big red place underneath his eye, and so please be in prayer for him. Then Sam Sager has been having some more chest pains. Went to the cardiologist on Friday. He's possibly going to be needing another stent, so please be in prayer for him. We asked prayer for Jeff and Josh Wagner last week as they were traveling to Florida, got back Thursday. They were successful in their journey, had a safe journey, so thank you for the prayers for them. Then for the Edwards family, as they had the funeral for Cindy yesterday, be in prayer for her husband Mark and for the other family members as they deal with Cindy's loss and continue to move forward. Be in prayer for Christians in countries where they're going through great persecution because of their faith right now. And speaking of other countries, be in prayer for our the two children that we sponsor in Uganda, Peter and Ruth, that they would continue to move forward in their schooling as well as in their growth as individuals and their growth in the relationship with Jesus Christ. Let's pray together. Let's be praying for each other. I've mentioned many needs here, but you know of others, so continue to be in prayer together for each other. I pray. Let's pray together. Father, we come before you right now, and we thank you so much that you are the God who sees all, is present with us, the power to do whatever is necessary to fix any situation. I pray that we will rest in you, that we will not worry, fret, fear, and try to take things in our own hands, but that we will rest in your power and in your grace and know that you do all things well. And regardless of, Father, whether we agree with what you tell us or whether we agree with how you answer our prayers, that it will not hinder our relationship with you, will not hinder our relationship with others, but that we will just rest in your love, your grace, and your enablement. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We're going to sing one more song together this morning. It's Blessed Assurance. Folks, we need to tell people our story. Of all people, we are the ones who should worry the least, not worry at all, really, but should be the most peace, should have the most smiles on our faces. Not because everything goes great for us, because we have just as much problems as those that don't have faith in Jesus Christ. Sometimes we have more. But what we have is Jesus. What we have is the Spirit living inside of us. What we have is God's Word to give us confidence for today and for eternity. We have blessed assurance. Let's sing together this morning. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood. This is my story, this song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending, bring from above echoes of mercy, whispers of love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with his goodness, lost in his love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. My story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I hope you can praise Jesus all the day long. Again, that doesn't mean that everything in your life is going great, but it does mean that you have a great God who is worthy of your praise at all times. Take your Bible, if you would, and open it to 1 Corinthians chapter 14. We're going to go through the whole chapter this morning. Don't worry, don't worry. You know, it has 40 verses in it and everything. We're not going to read each verse. We're going to read about one verse from each section after we do look at some preliminary verses here and everything. But we're going to look at the principles that are taught concerning the topic that this passage deals with. So let's just read verses 1 through 5 here of this passage. Then I want to bring your attention to a couple of other passages as we get into our message this morning. It says this, verse 1, follow after charity, which is the Old English word for love, and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that ye may prophesy. For he that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaketh not unto men, but unto God. For no man understandeth him, howbeit in the Spirit he speaketh mysteries. But he that prophesieth speaketh unto men to edification and exhortation and comfort. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifieth himself, but he that prophesieth edifieth the church. I would that you all spake with tongues, but rather that ye prophesied. For greater is he that prophesieth than he that speaketh with tongues, except he interpret, that the church may receive. Let me read a couple of other passages that have to do with this topic as well. Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. That's Acts 2, 1 through 4. Then one more passage, 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 and 2. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. All month long, we have been addressing issues that people are curious about. The question we will address today is, what does God say about the gift of tongues? Now, to begin with this one, I want to show you something. What do you make of that? That is the message that my phone delivered to some of my friends one Monday night. They did not know what to make of it or how to respond. Their humorous attempt at an explanation was this, quote, Chris must have fallen asleep on his keyboard again. 10 minutes later, they received a second, very similar message. It was this. Not surprisingly, no one answered that one. They ignored my words, if you could even call that message words. Now, I did not intend to make that exchange. My phone was acting on my behalf without my knowledge. Most of you have experienced that, and you would refer to it as butt dialing. When I finally had a chance to check my messages and see the nonsensical message that I had sent to them, I apologized and took steps to make sure that that did not happen again. The lack of a clear message on that day was of no consequence. It did not require or motivate an action from my friends. They correctly assumed that I was not experiencing a medical emergency and that I did not need the help of medical personnel. The message was simply unintentional gibberish. Unintentional gibberish is the explanation that some offered for what they heard from Jesus' followers on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2. To them, the message delivered in foreign languages was just as unintelligible and disregardable as the one your phone creates when you reposition yourself in the chair. God gave gifts to the church to unify it, but the spiritual gift of tongues has created controversy from the first day of its use until this day. Because this topic is a controversial one, even a divisive one, you might be questioning the wisdom of addressing it. Now, believe me, I do not court controversy. Conflict avoidance is built into my DNA. I am not a shock jock attempting to grow our audience by discussing subjects that will get a rise out of people. In fact, as I will communicate later in this message, some of what I have recently covered has diminished the number of people that have access to our broadcast. There are some portions of the Bible that, quite frankly, I would like to skip over. 1 Corinthians 14 is one of them. It would be convenient if we made it our policy to just deal with the things in the Bible that are easily understood and that would create no controversy. Unity is what we want, right? Well, contrary to the United Nations Charter and the stated goal of the current administration, unity is not the ultimate prize. Truth is far more important than unity. Jesus forewarned us that truth will lose its appeal the further it gets from the majority opinion and the closer that we get to the end of the world. Jesus said, Matthew 10:34, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." If I must sacrifice unity to have truth, then I will. But I refuse to sacrifice truth for the sake of the false god of unity. Skipping everything in the Bible that could potentially create strife would require us to discard the Bible entirely and proclaim Shakespeare instead. To be or not to be, that is the question. Still, I don't do Shakespeare so good, so we're going to stick with the Bible if that's okay with you guys. Still, there are many other passages in the Bible that are easier to digest than the one that we're going to take a look at this morning. Why choose this one? It's so divisive, and since it is the issue of tongues is not an issue that our church is currently dealing with. Let me give you two reasons. The first and most important reason for us to deal with a discussion on tongue speaking is because God included it in the Bible. I'm not the one bringing up this subject. God already did that. Anything he included in the Bible is worthy of our attention and important for us to understand. The second reason for this message is the presence of churches and Christians all around us who do speak in tongues. You may have friends that do. Some of this tongue speaking is genuine, but some is counterfeit. I want you to be able to recognize the difference. The church has abused the gift of tongue speaking more than any other of the Spirit's gifts, especially over the last century. I wonder, what would it be like if churches sought and exercised the gift of service or mercy or evangelism as fervently as they do the gift of tongues. In our church, the predominant forms of religious heritage, as best I know, are Brethren, Methodists, and Baptists. Those groups usually have little experience with people speaking in tongues. I am confident of something, though. I'm confident that as our church doors reopen, that we will have new people who walk through those doors in the coming months. And it probably will not be long before we have somebody in our church that wants to speak in tongues. We need to know what the Bible has to say about it so that we will know how to properly respond. My purpose as we address the gift of tongues this week is not to bash other preachers or denominations. I have never done that before. I'm not starting now. I know who our enemy is. And it is not the church down the street or in the next town or across the country. To the extent that those churches are teaching the Word of God and working to bring people into the kingdom like we are working together. Speaking in tongues seems to be far more common today than it was in the early church. Only a few biblical records exist of that practice. The first was on the day the Holy Spirit gave the gift of tongues to 120 believers that were gathered in the upper room. The record of that is in Acts chapter 2. Cornelius and those with him who believed Peter's message shared a similar experience spoken of in Acts 10. The third and final recorded instance was when Paul encountered 12 disciples at Corinth and administered the gift to them. That's in Acts chapter 19. The temptation is to use what happened in these circumstances in order to gain a full understanding of the gift of tongues. That would be unwise. While you do not have to evaluate experience to receive benefit and enjoyment from it, you must properly interpret it, whether it's your experience or someone else's, if you want to discover the truth that experience. The truth can be difficult to assess because everyone brings bias to their explanation. That bias usually flows out of their experience. Sadly, some people are satisfied with experience. They have no appetite for truth. Many years ago, I spoke with a friend, and I forget exactly what we were talking about, but I remember this. I remember in the midst of our conversation, somehow the gift of speaking in tongues entered into our conversation. I showed her some of the same biblical statements that we're going to look at in just a minute, but the problem was that those statements conflicted with her experience. She concluded our discussion with these words, quote, "I don't care what the Bible says, I know what I saw." See, if you have already, like my friend, if you haven't already, you will one day face a situation where what the Bible says and your experience is conflict with each other. That leaves you with a choice. Which do you follow? Your experience or God's truth? Your experience is temporary and may be influenced by anything from a lack of sleep to an angry encounter that you had with your boss. God's truth is eternal, and it flows from His wisdom that has been verified across generations of time and in every possible context. Experience or truth, those are your options. Experience and the teaching of truth separate Acts 2 from 1 Corinthians 14. Both passages are significant for a good understanding of this gift, but each passage has its purpose. The first passage, Acts 2, is descriptive. It tells what happened at Pentecost, but does not include a lot of details about tongues itself. The Spirit came, people spoke in languages, those languages being foreign to them, and the unusual sound drew a crowd. I think we can all agree on those details. The second section, and the one people reference less frequently when discussing tongues, is 1 Corinthians 14. It is prescriptive whereas Acts 2 is descriptive. 1 Corinthians 14 gives precise instructions for how believers should use the gift of speaking in tongues. Because of these differences between Acts 2 and 1 Corinthians 14, Paul's letter to Corinth is the better choice for determining the proper use of tongues, or the gift of languages, as some call it. For our purposes, we will define tongues this way: the ability the Holy Spirit gives to communicate in a language the speaker has not learned. Let me say that again. The ability the Holy Spirit gives to communicate in a language the speaker has not learned. Now, that's a broad description. We could further limit it, but because the Bible suggests that there may be more than one type of tongues, an earthly one and a heavenly one, we will use this scope. Now, before examining 1 Corinthians 14, we need to understand two facts. Paul, under the inspiration of the Spirit, the same Spirit, by the way, that empowers the gift of tongues as well as all the other gifts, wrote 1 Corinthians to an abusive church. In their pride, the church had perverted the Lord's Supper, God's intention for marriage, sexual boundaries, and the gifts of the Spirit. God sent this letter to that church to correct their thinking and their practice. Secondly, what the Spirit teaches in 1 Corinthians 14 deals with the use of tongues in public, particularly within a church service. In verses 19 and 28, Paul uses the phrase, quote, in the church. In verse 26, he says, when you come together. Though he also mentions the private practice of tongues, particularly in verse 2, Paul does not here focus on proper etiquette for tongue speaking in that environment. So, everything that we say today particularly deals with when we come together as the church and meet together as the church. We're not going to deal with whatever might happen between you and God when you are in private. With these two foundational thoughts, join with me as we examine the limitations that the Bible puts on the gift of tongues. First, when you speak, your words should show that you love your audience. Most people have heard the following words from a frustrated parent. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Yeah, you finished it for me, didn't you? Tammy was mouthing it over there. I could tell. I could hear her lips part there. The way you deliver a message impacts the meaning of that message, how willing the person you're trying to receives it. Correcting the message's tone at Corinth was part of Paul's mission for this epistle. 1 Corinthians 14 is the final segment of a major section on spiritual gifts. The main thrust of this chapter is the superiority of prophecy over tongues. Listen to how Paul begins this whole section. Pursue love and desire spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. 2 chapters earlier in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul lists many of the gifts, explains their purpose, and warns about what will happen when these gifts are abused. Sandwiched between 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 14 is, you guessed it, 1 Corinthians 13, which is Paul's famous description of love. He begins that chapter with these words. Verse 1, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. I'm just making noise. Those are the words he uses to begin 1 Corinthians 13. He continues that theme regarding the gifts of prophecy, knowledge, faith, mercy, and generosity. Paul's message is clear. Love is the only motivation or method that God accepts. Without it, all our efforts are vain, powerless, and futile. Love is patient, kind, and selfless. But envy, boasting, and pride evidence a lack of love. Sadly, these latter issues saddened the Corinthian church. How the people manifested their spiritual gifts gave the greatest evidence of their failure to love. Instead of unifying the church and convincing them of their need for each other, the gifts were hindering their relationship with each other. They were disintegrating into factions. Other than the gift of prophecy, tongues was the only gift that Paul mentioned in all three chapters, 12, 13, and 14, all these chapters that are dealing with the spiritual gifts. Using tongues improperly was a major cause for the church's struggles. It was hindering their relationships. Their individual gifting prompted a superior attitude rather than a recognition of their need for each other. They didn't love each other or the people that God had called them to reach. The church's primary mission is to convey God's message to His creation and to use love to do it. He wants a relationship with people, and He uses us to help build that bridge. There's a problem, though. God's message has an unpleasant starting point. It tells man's sinful state and God's impending judgment. That is where Peter began his message on the day of Pentecost. That negative beginning, the pit you dig with God's righteous anger, provides a prime opportunity, though, to pour in God's unfathomable love. The resulting hole then becomes a foundation for grace instead of a place to bury a soul. Though none of you may have exercised or experienced the gift of tongues, I haven't, some of you may act as if you have the gift of prophecy. You use it often. You can be overly harsh. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, so don't be sending me nasty emails or anything. But if the shoe fits, your gifting moves you as God's messenger to behave in a manner like Jonah's. Without any concern for how others will receive your message, you go in, announce the enemy's doom, and then climb a hill from which you can enjoy eating popcorn until God's wrath rains down. It makes it easier, simpler, when you resist feelings of compassion for those who will soon experience God's judgment. Jonah is a poor example of how to deliver your message. Instead, follow Jeremiah's example. He too delivered a harsh message of judgment, but he did so with a broken heart. One prophet loved the people who heard his words. The other did not. Of which kind are you? So first, if you want your words to be effective and instead of just using them to make noise, use them to show love to your audience. And by the way, this is as good a place as any. If I haven't said this in a while, for you, my church family, and my friends, I love you. And know that whatever comes from these lips toward you, even sometimes when it steps on some toes, is coming from a heart of love. The second principle is this. Use your words to strengthen the church. Look at verse 4 of 1 Corinthians 14. He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself. But he who prophesies edifies, and that word edifies means to build up the church. After emphasizing love as the proper way to express any of the spiritual gifts, Paul narrows his discussion to two of them, prophecy and tongues. Immediately, that the gift of prophecy is more desirable than the gift of tongues. That may at first be self-evident to you. Most people understand prophecy as the ability to look past the horizon and see what it is that's coming. Tongues, as we've said, is the ability to speak in a language that you have not learned. Which would you rather do? Which would get you more attention? Many people have learned another language, but no one can accurately predict the future on their own. Prophecy, though, was not primarily used to be able to tell the future. Its purpose was to forcefully communicate to a predominantly resistant audience a message that they probably already knew. This was true of the Old Testament prophets, and it was also the case in the New Testament church. The prophet communicated vital information that would determine someone's eternal destiny. It was a life and death situation. I recently learned that researchers for the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority found over 200 dead crows near Greater Boston. After confirming that the crows did not die from a new form of bird flu, they determined that the cause of death appeared to be sudden impact with vehicles. Well, they examined these crows pretty closely, and they noticed that there was paint on their beaks and paint on their claws. And as they examined that paint, they realized that 98% of the crows died from impact with a truck, whereas 2% were killed by impact with a car. The researchers then hired an ornithological behaviorist to determine if there was a cause for the disproportionate percentage of truck kills versus car kills. The ornithological behaviorist very quickly concluded the cause. He discovered that apparently when crows eat roadkill, they always have a lookout crow in a nearby tree to warn of impending danger. They discovered that while all the lookout crows could shout, "Caw, caw," and none of them could shout, "Truck." Well, you can thank my daughter for that one. We often send dad jokes back and forth to each other to see who can get the biggest groan or the biggest grin. Humor is the language that we share. It binds us together. It promotes laughter, and laughter almost always builds people up. Prophets rarely use humor, though. God intended that their message, though straight-laced, should still strengthen the church. How? By pointing out sin and leading people to get rid of that sin in their lives. Part of the prophet's job was to receive a message from God, but he did not feel satisfied until he had delivered that message. Often the words he spoke made him unpopular, and he faced a powerful temptation to be silent. When he resisted that urge and submitted to God's call in his life, he benefited God's people. Prophecy always requires a recipient beyond the prophet for there to be a gain. However, a human audience is not necessary for tongues to have value. Since tongue speaking can manifest as a private spiritual experience, the speaker could be the sole beneficiary of an event that only he and God witness. In a public environment like a church, though, tongues cannot have a positive impact. It cannot edify the church without an interpreter. The church gains nothing. Listen to verse 5 of 1 Corinthians 14. He who prophesies is greater than he who speaks with tongues, unless indeed he interprets, that the church may receive edification. Now, there's nothing unethical about a person exercising their spiritual gift and them receiving personal benefit from that exercise. Any Christian will testify that he receives joy when he's using what God has given him in order to benefit other people. One sure way to receive a blessing is to be a blessing. That is a byproduct, though, not a motivation. God did not give any of the spiritual gifts solely for the benefit of the person who has that gift. He designed all of them for the good of the church, not the good of the individual. Though the gift of tongues can be used in a self-serving way, God would not have given it if it were evil. Neither would Paul, as he did in verse 5, have suggested, man, I wish you all could speak in the gift of tongues. The gift of tongues is good. Prophecy, however, is better. Since the clear words of the prophet require no interpreter, his message has greater potential for an immediate response from the group. The church's health was always the predominant thought in Paul's mind. The same must be said of us as well. Your words must show love, and they must benefit someone other than yourself. Third, your words must promote clear communication. Look at 1 Corinthians 14, verse 7. Even things without whether flute or harp, when they make a sound, unless they make a distinction in the sounds, how will it be known what is piped or played? Well, before radio, telephones, and electronics, people could deliver messages over long distances to one another. They used reflective surfaces, smoke signals, and flashing lights to deliver messages through sight. Drums, horns, and other musical instruments gave instructions through sound. They had to be very careful, though. An imprecise message would result in confusion to one side's territory being overrun by the other. Only accuracy in the delivery and interpretation of the message could result in an appropriate response. Today, technology has advanced enough to allow the global instantaneous transmission of words as our primary means of communication. Though smoke still signals a vital message, and Morse code is something that we might use in an emergency, we do not rely on these any longer for everyday communication. That's a good thing. Using these messages to deliver a message requires precision and skill. And we, quite frankly, have gotten lazy. We use our lips to talk. Talking is easy. 1-year-olds can do it. Speaking to be understood is difficult. Speaking to motivate change is tougher still. Perhaps we have succumbed to Jonah's flaw. Understanding and directed action from our listeners is no longer the goal. We are too easily satisfied. Hearing ourselves speak, either audibly or in an online rant, somehow has become enough. You hear someone say, "Well, I got that off my chest. I feel better now." In verse 9, Paul calls that speaking into the air. Today, we sometimes refer to that as yelling at the darkness. You may be speaking, but is anybody listening? More importantly, are your words changing minds and leading people to action? If you want to promote understanding and action, you must choose your words wisely. Words mean something. The message you intend to convey and the interpretation the receiver attaches to your words could be vastly different. Something often happens in the transmission of words between source and recipient, resulting in a lost or garbled message. That usually comes from a lack of precision in communication. This summer, Nancy Arbogast, I'm very thankful for this, by the way, she gathered the ladies together at church outside or inside in order to be able to have some fellowship with one another. And June was usually one of the participants there, and she would usually bring some kind of funny story or some poem or whatever it might be. And she brought this story to us last summer. It was of a man who lived in upstate New York and was getting tired of the cold weather. Sound familiar? He decided to take a trip to Florida. Since his wife was on a business trip at the time, he called her to let her know what he was doing and to tell her not to go back to New York, but instead to meet him in Florida. When he arrived, he sent her an email to let her know that he was safely there. Unfortunately, he got a few letters wrong in the address of that email, which resulted in his message being received by a recently widowed pastor's wife in Iowa instead of his wife in New York. The little old lady turned on her computer, read the email, screamed, and fainted. Her family and friends who were there came in and saw her on the floor. When they read the screen, they understood why she fainted. This is what the email said. "Dearest darling, just wanted you to know I arrived safely. Looking forward to you being with me tomorrow. Signed, your husband. P.S. It sure is hot down here. Clear communication requires precision. Confusion will not get you the reaction that you want. The use of tongues at Pentecost triggered a mixed reaction. Some expressed amazement. Others responded with ridicule. The words, though clear to those familiar that understood the dialect, were not understandable by all. The crowd did not know what to do. However, no person there had any difficulty interpreting the prophecy that Peter offered. He said, Jesus is the Messiah, and you murdered him. The words convicted them, and they responded with these words, what can we do? And Peter gave a very clear answer, repent. Clear communication gave them the option of choosing Jesus. Those in the group who refused to embrace the message rejected it due to their rebellious hearts rather than a lack of comprehension. Making noise is simple. Fireworks do that very well. They will draw a crowd. The sight and sound might even prompt some amazement. Most will enjoy the show. But at the evening's conclusion, the group will go home unchanged. What is your goal when you speak? To make a loud and distinct people's attention, or to communicate a clear message prompting people to respond? Having your goal in mind will guide the means of communication that you choose to use, tongues or prophecy. Each one is valuable in its proper context. That's why Paul said in verses 18 and 19 of 1 Corinthians 14, I thank my God I speak with tongues more than you all. Yet in the church I would rather speak 5 words with my understanding that I may teach others also than 10,000 words in a tongue. Paul's attempt to magnify the gift of prophecy over the gift of tongues might lead you to believe that the gift of tongues was insignificant. Not so. Scripture does not negate the value of tongues. It promotes the value of understanding. And understanding is especially important when you are talking to someone who does not understand his need for Jesus. So, number 4, when you speak, think about how the unbeliever will respond. Look at verse 23 of 1 Corinthians 14. If the whole church comes together in one place and all speak with tongues, and they are uninformed or unbelievers, will not they say that you are out of your mind? Next Sunday morning at this time, we will be meeting in our church building located at 18,800 Middle Ridge Road in Rawlins, Maryland. I can't wait. People will once again walk through our church doors. When people who did not grow up in church and have no relationship with Jesus walk through our church doors, participate in our church service, whether it be in person or online, when they see what we do, listen to what we say, what is their reaction? Is it a foreign language to them? Now imagine if they were to walk into our church service and everybody's speaking in tongues all at the time and they have no idea what's going on. They're going to walk in and they're going to turn around and walk right back out again. But that can also be true if we say things in such a way that we use terms that are very familiar to Christians but are not familiar to somebody who does not have a church background. Therefore, when we shape the church meeting, we must keep in mind the possibility that people who have no understanding of Jesus may be there. The spiritual maturity of the audience should not determine the message's content, but it should affect how it is delivered and maybe even how long it is. Paul was not opposed to lengthy messages. He preached a few of his own. He was antagonistic toward any message, short or long, that served to distance the lost and give a bad name to Christians due to the message's incoherence. The people in the Corinthian church liked to hear themselves talk without consideration of whether the message was getting through or how the audience was receiving it. From the people's perspective, the more words, the better. They did not understand that using an overabundance of words as the evaluated tool of your level of importance is a sign of immaturity. To the Corinthian church, the audience's response was the audience's problem, not the speaker's. While that is true to a certain extent, the speaker should at the minimum care how his audience is responding. That's one reason why I'm so excited that I'll be with you very, very soon, because then I'll be able to see the reaction on your faces. When you get what it is that I'm trying to communicate, sometimes unsuccessfully, then I'll be able to see the smile on your face, the look of affirmation. But I'll also be able to see the confused look on your face as well, letting me know that I need to explain a little bit further. And if there is ever a time, when we're in person or online, that I do not make myself clear, please ask me for clarification. My goal is to be clear with you because you cannot do what you need to do without knowing what it is you need to do. Paul's concern was that though a message might be good, the delivery method could obscure it and even drive people away. The message is more important than the delivery method or the messenger. No spiritual gift had as its prime motivation the spiritual experience of the one who exercised it. The probable response of the recipient deserves greater consideration than the speaker's comfort, enjoyment, spiritual experience, or desire. We dare not change the message for fear that it will offend and cause people to reject it. Nor should the possibility that others will think us weird because of what we say lead us to shy away from any biblical subject, especially the gospel. However, the same hesitancy does not apply to our method of delivery. If others think us crazy, and if they choose to walk away, let it be because of what we say, not how we say it. My words have recently gotten me into trouble. Tammy can confirm that I say more words behind the pulpit and screen than I do at any other time. And being that Facebook now records my words, I cannot deny them, nor would I want to. My message on January 17th dealt with how we as Christians should respond to government even when we feel that that government is illegitimate. Honestly, I was a little bit nervous about delivering that message. I thought that it would be axed by Facebook's censors. But surprisingly, it was this past Sunday's message about how we know that God exists that created an issue. Facebook did not like some of what I had to say. I know that because they limited the number of people who saw that post. They rejected something that I said. I do not know what it was, but I have my suspicions. Now, I'm thankful for the opportunity that Facebook affords us. Through their platform, we have a voice that reaches into people's homes, allowing us to touch lives in other states and even other countries. Without it or a service like it, these virtual worship meetings could not have happened. I want people to tune in each Sunday morning. It excites me to see the number of live viewers increase. Now understand this. I have no interest in more people seeing this face, but I am highly interested in more people hearing and understanding my words. Why? Because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. And as that same passage says, that's in Romans chapter 10, how can they hear without a preacher? I want people to get saved. I think you want the same. So we as Christians and as a church will use whatever biblical means we have to accomplish that goal. However, we will do so according to the requirements that God has given. This passage lists 3 of them when it comes to the proper way to use the gift of tongues, and all of them fall under the category of when speaking in front of others, give proper respect. Paul ends this section with an overriding principle that at first might not appear to fit with the rest of the chapter's content. He states that God is orderly. Look at verse 33 of 1 Corinthians 14. It says this, God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. Of all the characteristics of God that Paul could point out, this one would seem to be rather insignificant. Love, holiness, truth, omnipotence. Surely these are the traits of God that we should consider. But Paul highlights God's orderliness. You might ask what that reality has to do with the gift of tongues, or prophecy for that matter. Well, here's the answer. Since God created an orderly universe, he expects his followers, especially within the church service, to operate in an orderly fashion. The chapter ends with these words in verse 40. Let all things be done decently and in order. Order does not necessarily mean that happenings follow in a prescribed sequence. In this case, order means that someone is in charge. Someone is controlling both what is being communicated and how it is being said. And the person he's speaking of is not me or any other preacher. That someone is God's Spirit. Rather than being controlled by human desire or human opinions, the church service should be Spirit-led. Spirit-led does not excuse a lack of planning or laziness. It does not mean haphazard or even spontaneous. Following the Spirit's prompting in the worship pastor's planning meeting is just as spiritual as altering the plan from the pulpit. God's creativity and his order are not mutually exclusive. Though the church is not a legal proceeding where you might expect to hear order in the court, it, of all places, should reflect God's character. Because God is organized, the public gathering of his church must be as well. That structure should be represented in more than just a piece of paper that tells when the Sunday morning events happen in relation to each other. Order is important to God, but often it is not important to his people. My son Ben asked me why I care that his room is not orderly. He reasoned that if he lived in it and the smell did not bother him, he should be allowed to keep it however he wanted. He questioned why he should restore his bed every morning to a showroom tidiness if he was just going to sleep in it again in a few hours. Does that sound familiar? Instead of using the valid arguments of ownership, your room is in my house, and authority, because I said so, that's why, I took the more spiritual route. I said, God created you in his image. You are to reflect God to everyone you meet. That includes your character, actions, and your possessions. Does your chaotic room declare God's glory? I waited for a response. Did my reasoning work? No. If you want to come over here and check out Boone's room right now, you can see it for yourself. My failure, though, had nothing to do with my logic. My argument was sound. Cleanliness truly is godly. The issue that prevented him from accepting my conclusion. He did not want others telling him what to do. Neither do we. We demand independence, even if how we express ourselves in the church service conflicts with what God has already said in his word. In this section of 1 Corinthians 14, Paul addressed a flagrant lack of order characterizing the church meetings in that church. People came to the church because they had something to share with the group, not because they wanted to hear from God. If one speaker was taking too long to finish their, quote, word of encouragement, the next person would interrupt. Multiple speakers, some of them using foreign languages, might be addressing the group at the same time, each upping his volume to make sure he got heard over the competition. They were not going to let anyone prevent them from getting their voice heard. Too many preachers occupied the room with no one left to respond. The church became a place for people to project whatever they wanted to say, regardless of who was listening. There was no respect, not for each other, not for people's time schedules, or for the message that God wanted to deliver. It was a mess, and it stunk. Worse, in fact, than Ben's room. To remedy the situation, Paul laid out some rules that would bring order to individual church meetings. First, a maximum of 3 people could speak using the gift of tongues or prophecy. Look at verses 27 and 29. If anyone speaks in a tongue, let there be 2 or at the most 3, each in turn. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others judge. Second, before someone could speak in tongues in a church service, there had to be an interpreter present. If there were the tongues, the speaker had to keep silent. Look at the latter part of verse 27 and verse 28. Let one interpret, but if there is no interpreter, let him keep silent in church and let him speak to himself and to God. The only way for the listeners to benefit, to be built up by the message the tongue speaker gave, was for someone to interpret his words. And the third requirement was that each person had to wait his turn to speak. No one was allowed to interrupt. Look at verse 27 and 30 and 31. If anyone speaks in a tongue, let there be 2 or at the most 3, each in turn. If anything is revealed to another who sits by, let the first keep silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, that all may learn and all may be encouraged. By giving these stipulations, Paul hoped to end the chaos and restore respect. These rules for governing those who speak in the church, either using the gift of prophecy or tongues, are one way of knowing whether they're being exercised properly. The temptation then and now is to lay the fault at the feet of the Spirit when people fail to follow guidelines. When confronted with the fact that their actions do not fit with what the Bible requires, they might say something like this: well, I couldn't help myself. The Spirit took control and I just had to speak. Do not let them fool you. Demons may take control, but the Holy Spirit always gives Christians the option of delaying or refusing his prompting. Listen to verse 32. The spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. You, as the gift user, are under control of how you use that gift. Ask yourself this question: is the person speaking doing so to benefit God and his church or himself? God designed the message to be for his glory and for people's growth. If you serve for God, then you must do it according to his commandments. The Spirit will never direct you to behave in a manner that conflicts with the Bible. He inspired the biblical record. Why would he tell you to do something that disagrees with what he has already said? That would be inconsistent. It would lead to confusion, and he is a God of order. These imperatives apply to the church of Corinth in the first century. They apply equally to our church today. God's requirements do not change, regardless of time, location, desire, or social acceptability. I do not know if you figured this out yet, but the intent of this message has been about something bigger than the gift of tongues. Good communication is crucial at church, but the home, workplace, and community need it as well. The confusion that was happening at the church in Corinth gave Paul an opportunity to teach helpful communication skills, skills that apply inside the church and outside the church as well. Putting limits on tongue speaking and giving instructions for its use was the vessel, but good communication was the hoped-for destination. So, how's your communication doing? Are you getting your message across? Or is a disconnect happening somewhere, prompting intense frustration and confusion? You wonder where this tension is coming from and why no one is following your directions. It might have nothing to do with what you're saying, but how you're saying it. Some of you are overusing the language of anger. It may be the only language you know. Are you another language if that's what it takes to communicate with your children, your spouse, or your neighbor? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about Spanish, German, or Navajo. There are many languages not associated with a country. Some revolve around a skill, a memory, or a favorite topic. My son speaks the language of video games and politics. Your spouse might speak math, baking, art, or the hardest language of all, the language of emotion. You may speak the language of cars or hunting. Are you willing to adjust how you speak to bridge the communication gap? Whatever language you use, your mother tongue, one you learned, or one the Spirit gifts you with, deliver your message using the principles that Paul laid out here in 1 Corinthians. Love your audience. Work to strengthen those who hear. Focus on clear communication. Consider how the person who disagrees with you will respond. Give proper respect. Only by considering the message to be more important than the messenger or the method of its delivery will cause people to respond by giving glory to God and seeing their eternity wondrously changed. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you that you sent a clear message in Jesus Christ. He was the Word, and the Word delivered the message that God loves us. And the Word showed us in his death on the cross and his resurrection from the grave the only means that we have to see our sins washed away. Father, forgive us for those times that we have not communicated your message clearly and passionately to a world that needs to hear it, substituting instead what we want to say and saying it in a way that drives people away. Guide our mouths. Keep them shut when they need to be shut. Pry them open when they need to be opened. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. If this message has been valuable to you, get the word out. Share it with other people so that others can hear the message of God's love. Do whatever you need to do in order to communicate with people that greatest message of all. This will be the last week that we do our weeknight Bible studies. Even though we're going to be in person, starting next Sunday morning, we will still be here on Facebook. So we'd love to have you in person with us. But if you live too far away, or you've got your own church home that you go to on Sunday mornings, or you're just not comfortable being in an in-person environment yet because of COVID, we'll still have this available for you. So join in with us in whatever means it is that you have. Tuesday through Thursday at 5 o'clock this week, we will continue our theme of tongues. We did not get to the last section of this chapter, so we will deal with that either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Let me give you a preview for what we're going to be dealing with starting next week. We're going to be looking at the wonderful, beautiful story of Ruth beginning next week and all through the month of February. I love you. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great week.